Hey, oh, there we go. Hi. Welcome to Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. This is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow, and we will be along with a live radio program in 6 minutes. The show gets going at 6:06. So if you're looking back at this not live, run this baby ahead 6 minutes. You'll see the start of the show. What will we have today? Let's look at those notes. Oh, yes, local actions for a global problem. We'll have our climate check with Melissa Baldauff, who knocks down the tired right wing talking points about how we shouldn't even try to tackle a changing climate. The problem's just too big. Also, a couple of legislative committees have been looking at the deal worked out between Governor Evers and Republican leaders on how to fund schools, both public and private. And we'll talk to some public education advocates who are not thrilled with the new plan. Also, an update on Tuesday's arrest and arraignment of former President Donald Trump. That and so much more coming up just under 5 minutes from now. See you soon.
Looking forward to talking with Trigby this afternoon.
Yes, I am. Yeah, that's right. I have to get used to this new Wednesday schedule.
Yep. Weird.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Let's do a show.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. Welcome to the state of Wisconsin Sense up here on the shores of Lake Wissota, where it's another beautiful but hazy day up north. It is Wednesday, June 14th, 55 degrees for folks listening on 93.5 The Tap along the Civic Media Radio Network. Let's see, it's 45 up in Boulder Junction, Johnson Creek coming in at 56, Sparta at 46, and over in Kewanee, 56 degrees on what should be a fair but hazy day. We'll get the full weatherology forecast coming up next hour. Coming up on the program this morning, local actions for a global problem. In this week's Climate Check, Melissa Baldauff knocks down these tired right-wing talking points that say individuals and communities and states and even countries shouldn't even try to tackle the planet's changing climate, as if one single global plan is the only course of action. So we'll talk more about that at the bottom of this hour. We will have that with Melissa Baldauff, who does our Climate Check each Wednesday morning with us now. Also, we'll have the latest on the arrest and arraignment on Tuesday of former President Donald Trump. I guess arrest and arraignment part deux might be a better way to put it. In our next hour, an unbalanced compromise for schools. Some key legislative committees on Tuesday took up the deal worked out between Governor Tony Evers and Republican leaders. It's an agreement that brings long overdue state funding to public schools and local governments, but also grows the size of the private school vouchers that are designed to weaken public education. We'll talk to a couple of public school advocates about that. Along the way, if you hear something that strikes you, tickles your fancy, whatever the case may be, and you want to sound off about it, our phone number here is 844-967-2789, or you can send us a note, radio@upnorthnewswi.com. I'm happy to report to Aaron Zommers back in Madison that, as you can see, I'm back in the home office here. The carpet project is coming along nicely, and there really isn't anything quite like being able to just dig your toes into brand new carpeting when it comes into a room. Just feels so good up here.
I wouldn't really know because any home that I've been in or anything like that, we've usually gone from old nasty carpet to hardwood, just because that's my parents' preference.
Well, that's actually, we've done that in two rooms here over the past 10, 12 years, something like that, where we've actually put hardwood floors in. This is the first time that we've actually replaced some of the carpeted rooms in many years. And so it's just a nice feeling to have that done. Some good craftsmanship going on here. Still plenty of chaos. I asked them to do the home office first so I could get back into the cozy confines here, but there's still furniture strewn about the place, but it is coming along. So I do like that part. I wanted to ask you this question as well. It's a vocabulary question. We were at one of our favorite watering holes yesterday, and there was kind of a newer bartender there. And I don't know, not every bar is different, of course, but this particular bar kind of has a little chute where you can put the glass bottles of beer, and then they kind of fall down below into a recycling bin. She was putting them down there with, the word I would use is gusto. She really seemed to enjoy throwing the bottles down there and hearing them, and it was loud. And then it got me thinking again, the old man in me coming out, that she likes to throw them down there with gusto. Does anybody else use the word gusto anymore? And what old beer commercial was it? Was it the beer with gusto? That should be one of our trivia questions one of these days.
Yeah, I definitely every now and then I'll use it or one of my friends will use it. It is a word that's still in the, American vocabulary so far as I'm aware. However, I have no idea what beer commercial used it.
Schlitz. It's actually Schlitz. And as I look it up
Oh,
now, there are
gotcha.
plenty of Schlitz beer commercials where their slogan was "Go for the gusto." I don't know that I've ever gone for gusto before, but if I did, it wasn't with Schlitz beer, which would explain why the Schlitz brewery isn't as busy as it used to be. It's
We may
actually
have to ask Luke Mathers about that based on his performance at the Brewers game we went to.
no, that was Pabst. He and the PBR, they are good friends, and that too was brewed not far away, just merely blocks away from where the old Schlitz brewery used to be. The Pabst brewery now is getting turned into something very nice, but it's going to take a little while, and you're just not going to see the same kind of beer there that you used to have once upon a time. There's a nice little brew pub there now in its place. I'm going to hold off on the Brewers because I want Aaron to hear more because he's not aware of how the game went last night. But let me start the preview sports just by saying the winter sports are done, and Miami did not win either one of them, neither the NBA Finals nor the Stanley Cup Finals, as the Vegas Golden Knights are your NHL champions, defeating the Florida Panthers in 5 games. And doesn't that just sound right? That the reigning hockey capital of the world is in the desert of Las Vegas, Nevada.
You know, it I don't know if that's better or worse than Miami anyway, so
Yeah, I mean either one, it was just a little weird. And I'm not going to have any stories about Packers minicamp. I'm just going to say I saw it come up on the TV while I was out to dinner. And I realized I was feeling nothing, like no tightness in my chest, no anxiety, like, oh God, what's Aaron Rodgers going to say this time? What's he going to do this time? I was just able to enjoy watching the Packers in minicamp, getting set for the season. I just feel like a load has been lifted, and we're going to have a better season regardless. I suddenly understand why my girlfriends dumped me back in the day. They just feel better. The world's a little lighter. Fine, Aaron, don't come to my defense. I'm good with that. Let's take a break. We'll go through headlines, somebody having a worse day than me being dumped, and that, of course, would be Donald Trump. We'll be back. You're up north.
I didn't know you were gonna go to me because I was like, there's not much time left. He's probably just gonna toss the break.
That's okay. Let's do a little climate check
So are you introing that one then?
at 6:30. Yes. No. You're taking it cold at 6:30, and then it's whatever time it is. It'll give me a minute or two afterwards to come out of it.
Sounds good.
What did we do for Billy Joel? And it's from Glass Houses, 1980. All right. It was on this day in 1980 that Billy Joel released the album Glass Houses. We'll have more to say about that in our history lesson and music break coming up a little later on this hour. All right, Aaron's going to keep his mic open to hear all about the drama last night at Target Field. Brewers up 5-3 heading into the bottom of the ninth. Devin Williams on the mound for the Crew in a save situation. He has been perfect in save situations this season, has almost never given up a home run overall. Michael Taylor, first man up, home run. Brewers are still up 5-4. Williams then gives up a walk. Pinch runner comes in, steals second base. Next batter up, Williams gives up a line drive single. The pinch runner comes home. We are now tied at 5. Next batter, Carlos Correa puts a 2-run walk-off homer into the left field seats to cap a 4-run bottom of the ninth off the usually dominant Williams, giving the Twins a 7-5 victory over the Brewers on Tuesday night. That's
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I'm just glad that I wasn't there.
And there were obviously a lot of Brewers fans there. They go to Target Field for the games there, just as Twins fans come down to American Family Field. It was a perfect evening in downtown Minneapolis. I'm sure it was a great time, and it was a great time for Brewers fans for the first 8 innings, and maybe a lot of them left at that point feeling pretty good. The short 2-game series with the Twins wraps up this afternoon. Colin Ray on the mound. The Brewers' 5-game losing streak means they are still in second place, 1 game behind the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Brewers are off tomorrow before starting a 6-game homestand, starting with 3 games this weekend as those Pittsburgh Pirates come to town. So despite any misgivings you might have, get yourselves out there to American Family Field and let's will the Brewers back into the win column. Listeners of Civic Media radio stations can hear the Brewers on a couple of different hometown stations here in the Oshkosh area. Oshkosh Air Support, 98.3 FM, 1100 AM, and in the Richland Center area, News from the Center, 107.7 and 1450 AM, your home for Brewers baseball there.
I've never really understood the people who just leave sports games early, that they're like, we're losing or we're winning. Like, aren't you there for the experience? If you're going to a movie, you're not like, oh, obviously, Luke Skywalker is going to beat Darth Vader. All right, I already know how it ends. Goodbye.
I guess I never thought of it that way. Yeah, you feel like it's going to go where it's going to go, so I'm just going to leave now. I got to beat traffic, You never beat the traffic. If you're beating the traffic, you are leaving way too early then,
Yeah, you're at the game for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. It's that Geico commercial where the group is talking about how to leave the game even as they're walking into the stadium. That's the only way. Otherwise, just accept that that's part of the experience, like you said, and watch the whole game.
Yeah,
Stick
you
around.
never know.
Because
Something might happen.
as the Twins proved, for all you know, it could have gone to extra innings and the Brewers could have won, but alas, they did not. All right, Donald Trump has become the first former president in history to face a judge on federal charges. He pleaded not guilty in a Miami courtroom Tuesday to dozens of felony counts, accusing him of hoarding classified documents and refusing government demands to give them back. Inside the courtroom, news reports say that he sat silently, scowling with his arms crossed. A lawyer entered a not guilty plea on his behalf in a brief arraignment that ended without him having to surrender his passport or otherwise restrict his travel. The arraignment, though largely procedural in nature, was the latest in an unprecedented reckoning this year for Trump, who faces charges in New York arising from hush money payments during the 2016 presidential campaign, as well as ongoing investigations in Washington about the 2020 election and the January 6th riot, and Atlanta into his efforts to undo the results of the 2020 race. Presidential historian Michael Beschloss said it pretty well. This was the never-before-seen arrest of an ex-president on grave federal criminal charges related to national security. And because we and a free press have been barred from watching and hearing it in real time, we didn't see Trump. We didn't see him on camera in the courtroom. The accused man managed to make it look more like a triumphant motorcade arrival. That was one of my big beefs with the coverage of this, something that I'm sure I'll get into with Mark Jacob again on Friday morning. But both for the flight down on Monday to Miami and then the motorcade on Tuesday, in both cases, you had news channels that were doing essentially the slow speed chase. Something like an hour or more of just a static shot, of the motorcade moving down the highway, both in up on the East Coast and then down in Miami. And then when Trump was done, he basically went into campaign mode, apparently went to a diner and tried to shake some hands there as well, but nothing inside the courtroom. And then, of course, Trump went back to his country club and gave a speech there. And yet there was nothing from inside the court. Not that I'm necessarily, always for cameras in the courtroom for certain things, but to not be able to see that essentially let Trump control the visual narrative. At one point, Jake Tapper on CNN had to on air instruct his control room to stop re-racking the footage of Trump, shaking hands, because that's not what yesterday was about. Yesterday was about an ex-president facing the potential of prison time for putting national security in danger. And yet, as many people noted, the two justice systems of the United States came starkly into play yesterday with the fact that there was no mugshot, there was no passport seizure, and he essentially went free without bond. It was said that Trump is not a flight risk because he's so well known. Are you kidding me? The man's got jets at his disposal. You don't think he could go off to some place and evade the charges and say, I'm done with the U.S. I can't get a fair trial there, so I'm just going to stay here until I'm reelected president, and then I'll make my triumphant return or something like that. How a judge doesn't put on severe restrictions on travel and who he can talk to. His personal valet is also facing charges. And as I understand it, normally criminal defendants are not allowed to be talking to one another and coordinating what they're going to say. And Donald Trump is nothing if not a master at coordinating what you would call witness tampering and having everybody get their story straight and be on the same page and basically undermine the facts that are trying to be uncovered in a court of law. Donald Trump truly got the kid glove treatment, and yet he is out there professing to be a victim, and right-wing media is playing along with it. At one point, I believe it was Fox News, had a chyron up on the screen, a little graphic of President Biden saying something about, wannabe dictator gives remarks from the White House while he prosecutes political opponents. Truly trying to make it seem like, in the words of Ron Johnson, a banana republic. When what you really have happening here is finally some justice and accountability. There is now the potential that Donald Trump faces accountability for his criminal activity because Ron Johnson and other Republicans in the United States Senate lacked what I would call the testicular fortitude to actually convict Donald Trump on things that he was so obviously guilty of doing. The things that, again, put at risk everything from national security to the state of our democracy. Now, he may not necessarily be convicted. A jury may exonerate him entirely and say the federal government didn't prove their case. Or it may be that all it takes is one juror to be a holdout and lead to a hung jury. And again, maybe Donald Trump is never convicted of these things. But it's important that we still go through with the exercise because he's not special. He's not above the law. He shouldn't get treatment any different than anybody else would be if they had taken classified documents out of their secure area, stored them clumsily, referenced them publicly, allow them to fall into hostile hands. That's something that you don't just let go. You wouldn't do that. It doesn't pass the other shoe test. In other words, imagine if this were Hillary Clinton and those boxes were in her bathroom. Do you think Ron Johnson would then be saying, oh, you can't prosecute her? It must mean we live in a banana republic. No, stop it. Again, they can't stop talking about people like Hillary Clinton or Hunter Biden. But as I'll say again, if Hunter Biden actually committed any crimes, let's see the charges. And if he indeed did commit crimes, people would want him locked up. They're not going to make excuses for him. That's how our justice system is supposed to work. But the Republicans there are so focused on playing games and potentially, again, grinding government to a halt that they can't get anything done. There are various factions in Congress, especially in the House of Representatives, that either are with or opposed to Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. There is a so-called Freedom Caucus, basically the furthest of the right-wing fringe in Congress. And apparently there are fellow Republicans there who gave them an earful. And to hear it told by one CNN reporter, Congressman Derek Van Orden was among them, slamming the Freedom Caucus in what was called a heated, expletive-laden speech during a closed-door meeting yesterday morning. Van Orden told colleagues his daughter is dying of cancer, and yet he still shows up to work, quote, every effing day. He also complained that he's been trying to introduce other bills that would save lives, like one about train safety, but he said it's not the crap, he used a different word, that gets on Fox News. One of the Freedom Caucus members, Congressman Chip Roy, responded saying that he has constituents too, and that he came to Washington to shrink government, which already tells you that he is not deserving of the title of congressman, because there are constituents in his district who have earned very vital services that he now wants to cut, but will not cut things like, say, the military, because again, two different standards. As a result, these games are keeping Congress from doing anything productive. They're even leading fellow right-wing conservatives like Derek Van Orden to get frustrated. And we're all getting nowhere in the process, all because they can't quit Trump even after everything that they've seen. All right, we'll do a little political climate check with Melissa Baldauff coming up next. You're Up North.
Your chances. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why.
When Derek Van Orden can't take it, you should reevaluate your stance.
I know. All right, I'm going to get some coffee. Let's do a little climate check as we do midweek each week with Melissa Baldauff about, well, there's no shortage of topics related to the climate, and some of it today will be a bit about the political climate. Melissa, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing well, thank you. Especially as we move toward what may be the beginning of the home stretch of the state budget process. But of course, there are many moving pieces, and we're going to talk about part of that. What a record state budget surplus could mean at the local level for climate efforts. But to get there, Melissa, let me set this up first with a story out of Montana, where the headline from the New York Times says a landmark youth climate trial begins in Montana, where 16 young people argue the state is robbing their future by embracing policies that contribute to climate change. And what they want is they hope the judge will order the state to consider climate impacts when approving new projects. But of course, Republican lawmakers have already approved a law that prohibits state regulators from considering the effects of climate when assessing large projects like new power plants or factories. So all in all, Melissa, the how do you want to call it? The back and forth on what to do about our changing climate is a matter not just in international circles and in Washington, D.C., but state capitals as well.
Right. And, it just kind of goes to show you how seriously young people take this issue and how important it is to them, because this is really about their future, their ability to have a healthy future, that our environment will be safe and healthy for them and for generations to come. And it's so impressive to watch young people develop in their advocacy on the issues that are so important to them. And I think climate change is, in addressing environmental concerns is really an issue where we've seen young people take charge. We've seen that internationally, like you said, with Greta Thunberg. We've seen it here in Wisconsin. There are youth action teams all over the state. Even in middle schools and high schools, I see the advocacy in my community. I've seen it in other communities around the state. So to see these young people in Montana step up and say, basically the grown-ups who are supposed to be in charge of these things aren't doing their jobs. They're not holding up their end of the bargain. They're not even considering doing the right thing. And so these young people said, you know what, we're going to step up and we're going to try to make a judge make you do the right thing. It's not where we should ever have to be. We shouldn't have to rely on, young people who should be, doing their, finishing college or starting their careers, learning something new about the world, just making their way into the world. We shouldn't be asking them to solve all these big problems because, the grownups who are supposed to be in charge can't get it together. But we've got these young people who are stepping up, and it's very impressive. And, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of hope that that elected leaders will be forced to do the right thing on any kind of speedy timetable. But I do hope that this is, a part of the process of making change and getting our leaders to do the right thing.
Well, because the young people not only have to overcome legislative barriers, but attitudinal barriers in their effort to get something that should be rightfully theirs. Older generations should have left the campsite cleaner than they found it, and they have not. And that is what led to this. But here's what I mean by an attitudinal barrier. They, in Montana, these young plaintiffs, want to say the judge should declare that the state support for the fossil fuel industry is unconstitutional, that the state government has failed to live up to its constitutional mandate to, quote, maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment in Montana for present and future generations. But the Republican Assistant Attorney General there says something that I know, Melissa, you've heard 1,000 times. Montana's emissions are simply too minuscule to make any difference. Climate change is a global issue that effectively relegates Montana's role to that of a spectator. How many times have we heard that because we can't solve the entire globe's problems, there's no reason for us to do anything?
Exactly. And, and because too many people want to take that approach and take that attitude, that's where we end up in this problem. If everyone could do their part, everyone could do their little bit, then that's what's going to be what makes a difference. If there was one simple snap of the fingers that would solve everything, I'm sure someone would have tried to monetize it and do it. The fact of the matter is, this takes everybody doing their part. It takes every level of leadership being willing to do the right thing, even though they can't on their own solve it. This really is something people have to solve together.
Right. And, one last note from Montana, they note that the effects of a warming climate are already spreading there. The shrinking glaciers at Glacier National Park, a lengthening wildfire season that threatens some treasured outdoor pastimes, and so on it goes. That again, it brings us back to what can we do here at home here in Wisconsin? When you think of actions that can be taken at the state and the local level, what kinds of activities do you encourage, beyond, I mean, this lawsuit is one thing. It's been tried in other states as well, but what are some other things that folks closer to home can do about a global issue, but in their backyard?
Right. I mean, I think one of the most important things that people can do, quite frankly, is, a lot of people, when they think about how we're taking action on the environment, on sustainability, on climate, they think, do I recycle? Am I trying to get an electric vehicle? Am I putting solar panels on my home? And all those things are really wonderful things that, as people are able to do, of course, they should try to do that if that's something they can. But I really think one of the most important things people can do is vote. That is one of that is our superpower that we have, is that we are able to make sure we get people into office at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. We heard a couple weeks ago when we had Allison Carlson on from the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition, we heard about all of the great work that is happening at the local level in our units of government around the state. And for people to be really mindful of what is happening in their local governments, in their communities, I think is such a big part of this, because that's where so much of the action is happening in states in this country.
Well, isn't another example of that found in what legislative Republicans here did by rejecting an expansion at the University of Wisconsin College of Engineering, and the rather petty cuts that they made because of DEI programs to attack diversity and equity and inclusion. I mean, these kinds of cuts and rejections from this state legislature, they're related to the climate in terms of, again, what that next generation can do to make things better around here.
Exactly. We know that we are so fortunate to have the University of Wisconsin system in this state, innovating, leading the charge on so many of these efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change. You think about the funding for, UW Extension, where we've got folks in the counties helping people on, resiliency issues, helping them with recycling programs, with, urban ag, and so many resources, from the university system really make a difference in our communities. It's not just about the students who are there, and it's not just about the professors who are there and the staff. I mean, it really is about what impact the UW system has on our communities as a whole, and on our state as a whole. And that's just one more reason it's so incredibly short-sighted to be cutting money from our higher education system. It's hurting our communities. It's hurting our residents around the state.
And action on this can take place at many different levels. When I was looking at information about what can state and local governments do, one particular website broke it down into 5 areas. I'm going to throw all 5 at you, and then you grab whatever you think is something important that folks can know about what can be done. They talk about buildings and energy, and that of course makes sense. There's land use. There's transportation and fuels, obviously. There's consumption and materials management. That sounds like a very important thing for like cities and counties and things like that. And then there's simply, community well-being, having clean air and things like that. I don't know if you present a list like that any differently when you talk to folks about a changing climate, but when you look at all of those areas, are any of them especially, in vogue right now, or any that you would especially encourage? What do you talk to folks about at the local level when it comes to climate?
What I talk about, and this is, important to me as a local elected official myself, and I'm speaking just as myself, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Village of Shorewood. But, when we're making decisions, it really is about what are the decisions we can make now that are going to be important now, that is going to help us be a good steward of taxpayer dollars now, but also have an impact in the future. And what I hear a lot from people are ways that we can improve energy efficiency. That is something that can have an impact right away. So, you might see local communities in the process of updating our streetlights. Some of our communities have really old infrastructure that is not compatible with, LED bulbs or energy efficiency projects. If we're, building a new building, how can we make it more energy efficient to not use as much, take as much heating costs? So those are the kinds of things that I hear about a lot, things that can have like kind of an immediate impact and are going to be sustainable for the future. But I do also hear a lot from my colleagues in local government about electrifying their fleets. So many of our local communities have a lot of vehicles. We have some of our larger cities have a bus fleet that they manage. And then we've also got, every community has snow plows, has, the trucks that the DPW staff uses, has vehicles that are shared, police cars, everyone's got a fleet of vehicles. So we do hear a lot about that, about electrifying fleets, which is something that, is a big energy cost and a big opportunity to do something to reduce emissions there.
And then finally taking it to the truly hyper local level, the individual level. You have the Inflation Reduction Act, which has all manner of incentives for individuals, small businesses, and others to, again, be more efficient and not contribute as much to the problem. And yet, part of the debt ceiling deal worked out with President Biden was a demand by congressional Republicans to claw back some of those funds. So, Melissa, that kind of takes us full circle to what you were saying, that of all the things you can do, solar powers and electric cars and everything else, voting is also a part of how you can have an impact on the climate.
It sure is, and I was just my husband and I were just chatting the other day about our energy bill, this most recent one, and it was nice and low because the weather was so good we didn't have to run our heat or our air. And just in a couple months, people are going to be getting those expensive heating bills again. And you think about, why we wouldn't want to take every opportunity to help people get assistance if they are eligible for it, because there is a lot of energy assistance available to folks, or to make improvements around their home to make it to where it's more affordable for them and that it's more reliable. So, it's just incredibly short-sighted when you see attacks on these programs that we know are going to help people, help them save money, and help the environment.
We get our weekly climate check from Melissa Baldauff, and we are so appreciative of it. Thanks so much, Melissa. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Another climate note I wanted to pass along, this one also at the state level, and it's from Arizona, according to the New York Times. As Arizona's two major sources of water, groundwater and the Colorado River, dwindle from drought, climate change, and overuse, officials are considering a hydrological Hail Mary, the construction of a plant in Mexico to pull salt out of seawater, then pipe it hundreds of miles, much of it uphill, to Phoenix. Now, the idea of building a desalination plant in Mexico is something that's been discussed in Arizona for years, but now a $5 billion project proposed by an Israeli company is under serious consideration, an indication of how worries about water shortages are rattling policymakers in Arizona and all across the American West. It just, Aaron, it reminds me that people, they forget how the Great Lakes are, what a freshwater source they are, and that we have to make sure not to allow the same thing here, basically sending a giant straw to suck the water out like they're thinking of doing to the ocean over hundreds of miles. It's not inconceivable it could happen here.
It just sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud.
It does, doesn't it? It looked like a serious news story, and then as I'm reading it out loud, you're absolutely right. But goofier things have happened. Now, all I got to do now is tell you that Foxconn is going to run the plant, right? But no, just kidding. That's not the case. But again, in the case of ways that I wouldn't spend your money if I could, Melissa Kay from Locally Grown Radio, WFHR, joins us for today's history lesson and music break. Next, you're Up North.
Hola, hola, hola.
Melissa.
Hello, hello.
Hello there. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Let's see. I gotta go here. Oh, that's what I should do. Oh yeah, I can get there. I can get there from here. Here we go. All right. I don't know. What can we say for Donald Trump's birthday?
Ugh.
Today.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Was that out loud?
Sorry. No, I think I had your mute button on. I think.
What good timing. I wish he was in jail for this.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
You know, it's not out of the realm of possibility that some judge would have said, "This is a national security issue. You can't be trusted."
Would be a great birthday present,
Yeah, well, you know, a fella can dream.
right?
It's obviously a terrible, sad thing that's happening in this country. But at the same time, karma.
Yes, that was a perfect pause just for that. Yes.
Indeed.
Hmm. So are you in beautiful Abbotsford?
I am.
Okay.
It's so glorious.
Oh, yes. A little hazy over there too.
I haven't actually looked outside today.
That's funny. All right.
My windows are not in view.
Right, here we go.
All right. Billy Joel fans know what this is. It is Sometimes a Fantasy from the album Glass Houses. And of course, all of us in high school at the time couldn't wait for the next line. Oh, that was so naughty to breathe heavy on the phone like that. Melissa Kay joins us from locally grown radio WFHR. Melissa, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
We bring all that up because, as I mentioned earlier, Billy Joel's 7th studio album, Glass Houses, went to the top of the charts this day in 1980 and would stay on top of the album chart for the next 6 weeks. Plenty of hits off of that one. And yeah, I got to say, in my high school, that album and what was REO Speedwagon, High Infidelity, where they were played nonstop. I mean, they just were. And I think maybe Loverboy. I don't know. When you think of albums that were played nonstop, or you know, artists in your high school days, guys, what would be? It's kind of like word association. High school songs and artists that were played repeatedly. Go. Oh, you both are just blanking out on me, aren't you? It's radio, Aaron. You got to talk.
Ace of Base comes to mind for me.
Ace of Base. Okay, Aaron.
I gotta say, it's a lot of the same stuff from middle school that I heard, where it's like if you're going to a school dance, the last song is gonna be "Good Riddance, Time of Your Life" by Green Day.
Of course, yes. See, a Green Day, perfectly acceptable answer there. Here's who you wouldn't have heard: Burl Ives. The singer from the mid 20th century, was born this day in 1909, passed away in 1995, but you still hear him every holiday season singing "Have a Holly Jolly Christmas." Guess whose birthday it is today, kids? Former President Donald Trump turns 77 years old today as a free man. And we'll just leave it at that. There we go. Happy birthday, Donnie. On this day in 1775, the Continental Army is established by the Continental Congress, making today the birth of the United States Armed Forces. And a couple of years later, the Second Continental Congress on this day passed the Flag Act of 1777, adopting the Stars and Stripes as the flag of the United States. Melissa, were you a Girl Scout or anything like that, where you had to learn like the flag code and how to properly, fly it and display it and everything else?
I did that in my grade school. I went to a one-room country schoolhouse when I was in grade school, and favorite job was flag duty because it was the easiest job. And you got to go outside and put the flag up in the morning and take it down at night. And we learned how to fold it properly. And on every Thursday, we would have our flag ceremony where we'd march up and we'd sing the anthem and, pledge allegiance.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Now, and everybody was taught back then to treat the flag with reverence. And
And
now you
respect.
see, now you see politicians in parades who basically, wear it as a cape or in some other fashion on them.
And that's part of the code. You're not supposed to wear it.
I know. And yet some people just don't seem to have an issue with that. This is a birthday in 1961. This was the birthday for Boy George, born George Allen O'Dowd, lead singer of Culture Club. He is 62 years old today. I got to admit, I had to double check just to make sure that he was still with us. I get him and some other singers mixed up as far as whether, because he went through a horrible heroin addiction. Maybe still is for all I know, but I know that that's what claimed George Michael and other folks. I had to double check on Boy George.
I'm
I had
surprised he's
to
only
also.
62.
Yeah, 62. Yep.
Wow.
This is also the birthday of Fighting Bob La Follette, born this day in 1855, the 20th governor of the state of Wisconsin. He passed away in 1925.
Mhm.
On this day in 1970, the Grateful Dead released their fourth studio album, Working Man's Dead, with some shorter songs than their previous albums. We'll hear Casey Jones a little later. Uncle John's Band was on there, tunes that made the band a bit more accessible. On this day in 1971, Emerson, Lake and Palmer released their second album, Tarkus. The number one song on this day in 1975 was by the band America. That guitar lick sound familiar, like little George Harrison, My Sweet Lord? Well, it could be because the producer of Sister Golden Hair was the Beatles' infamous producer, George Martin.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so.
And again, all we had in 1975 was AM radio, and that song, of course, was completely unstoppable. Are you bringing up My Sweet Lord?
Yes.
Look at that. Look at you. It's like, what a little mix master you are. It was on this day in 1996 that George Martin was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, and rightly so. He was a musical genius, even if he did occasionally borrow, one guitar lick for another song. Yeah, that could happen. Speaking of borrowing from another song, Puff Daddy did that this week in 1997 with I'll Be Missing You, his tribute to the late Biggie Smalls.
I've lost someone that truly love. Come on, check it out. Seems like yesterday we used to rock the show. I laced the track, you locked the flow. So far from hanging on the block for dough. Notorious, they got to know.
And given that this was 1997, it was kind of that era where some of us were going, we weren't quite sure when is it sampling and when is it plagiarism?
What is it stealing?
When is it just stealing? Did Sting and the police, did they get credit for every breath you take on this? And does P. Diddy, does Sean Combs have to pay royalties? Does he have to give writing credit? I'd like to know where that all, because back then it was still kind of can they do that? Really?
I am pretty sure that they do have to get it cleared with the artist. I know a lot of songs that I've looked into where I've been like, this is literally the exact same riff. I look at it and the songwriting credit goes to the original song. Or
Okay.
things like that.
Well, I would certainly hope
I
so.
hope so.
And finally, on this day in 2002, Mick Jagger was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Let's see. Roger contributes on Facebook. We'll talk about high school songs that are stuck there. Thriller makes
Oh,
perfect
yeah.
sense. Oh my goodness. How do you escape that? Melissa, tell me, the morning shows, they kind of shifted around a bit on locally grown radio in Wisconsin Rapids. How's that gone?
We did. It's going well. We have our sunrise show on our country station, WIRI 105.5. It's an FM station, and we have a country coffee and conversation. We talk about country news and happenings and listen to country music. It's great. And then That's from 7 to 8. Then we pop over to WFHR from 8 to 10 for our traditional morning show over there. And so we're just bouncing around.
Okay. Is there a lot different from the one show to the other?
Not a ton except the country music.
I like country music.
Yes, so do our
Bet
listeners.
your listeners do too. Well, eventually because I'm going to be starting a show just on 93.5 The Tap here in Chippewa Falls at some point in the next few weeks or so. And so I might have to drop in on your show and maybe borrow some ideas. See if
Absolutely.
I can.
We would welcome you.
I would love that. Hey, you have me on. I'll have that cross-pollination. It works so well here at Civic Media,
We love it.
Melissa Kay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too, guys.
All right.
Thanks
More
for the history lesson.
as always. We appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Back with more. You're Up North. There we go.
Ready.
Oh, thanks. Have a wonderful show.
Yeah, you too.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for the call. Bye.
Yep, bye.
On the new Civic Media app, listeners can click on a button for either calling or texting into a show. And apparently that feature works already.
I saw that and I was gonna see if maybe there was a memo saying, hey, be sure you guys, start to promote this. Kind of wanted to make sure it had been properly tested, shall we say.
Yeah, I don't know 100% how it all works. I know we haven't gotten any for this show yet. I know on the Stu Daniels show, we already got one, except it doesn't say anyone's name. It just says where they're listening from.
Okay.
So it just says phone number. Thanks, Stu. Great song.
All right. Well, so we have to encourage them to put their name in it, which is a little most people don't sign their texts.
Yeah, that's a thing that is weird in
Yeah.
any other circumstance.
Okay.
So I'll let you know if that ever gets updated, if we're able to give them a name. Like I know in our old texting service, which is a pain in the butt, and that's why people don't usually use it. When you get a number, you can label it and give their name. So
Okay.
that makes sense. But this way, at least it goes right to the other chat service we already use. I don't know.
Ever the changing technology.
I just look forward to the new app coming to Android sometime soon.
So it looks like I was looking to see if their 7:00 hour on the FM station is lumped in with their 8 to 10 show in terms of podcasts, but it is not, and it also doesn't have its own show. So looks like that is one of the hours that we don't put out as a podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder if that'll change or not. And well,
that's what I'm not sure if it's intentional or not. So yeah.
Right. Like I know we're not putting out Stu Daniels right now because so much of it is licensed music.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because on his show, basically, we sometimes play entire songs, or at least like half of it.
Oh, I know. Yep.
And if they're doing lots of country music, it would make sense not to podcast it, unfortunately.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Although I'm pretty sure the shows get recorded either way. It's just they're not publicly accessible. But if you wanted to listen to some for whatever reason, I'm sure you could.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
"30 seconds."
Okay.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
And welcome back to the second hour of Up North News Radio for this Wednesday, June 14th, Flag Day. It's the Army's birthday. It's National Bourbon Day. Coming up this hour, an unbalanced compromise on schools. Key legislative committees have been looking into the deal worked out between Governor Tony Evers and Republican leaders. It's an agreement that does bring some long overdue state funding to public schools and to local governments, but also grows the size of the private school vouchers that are designed to weaken public education in the first place. And we'll talk to Chris Hambuck-Boyle and Christian Phelps about that at the bottom of the hour. If you missed the last hour, our climate check with Melissa Baldauff knocking down some of the tired right-wing talking points about local actions for a global problem, you can catch us as a podcast. Just go to Apple, Spotify, all the other usual places, or the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us, where you can listen to any episode of any of our Wisconsin-made shows there, or you can subscribe as a podcast as well. But if you're here with us live, we appreciate it and invite you to call us 844-967-2789 if anything's on your mind, or you can email us radio@upnorthnewswi.com. The newsletter that we put out every day you can sign up for at our website, upnorthnewswi.com. Up North News being a separate entity from Civic Media, but happy to be partners for these 2 hours every morning on stations all across Wisconsin. In the daily newsletter today, a focus on Pride Month in Wisconsin, things that make Wisconsin special in the continuing fight for equality, equity, inclusion, diversity, the things that are really universally good, or at least so we thought, until politicians got in the way and decided that they could play games with it. which takes us to what Republicans in the Wisconsin legislature want to do. The University of Wisconsin system asked the legislature for an increase in the state budget of $436 million. Governor Evers proposed an increase of about $300 million. Instead, Republicans are looking at cutting the University of Wisconsin system's budget by a relatively paltry $32 million, but a cut nonetheless in what some have called the world's pettiest budget cut. According to Scott Bauer at the Associated Press, Republican state lawmakers were poised to cut funding as they clash over efforts by the UW to promote diversity and inclusion. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos said ahead of a meeting of the Joint Finance Committee Tuesday, he wants to cut the equivalent amount of funding that the UW system would use for diversity initiatives, which he estimates would be about $32 million. Vos called it, the diversity offices, a waste of taxpayer money. And the white guy went on to say it only furthers racial divides. Governor Evers had a sharp response. Make no mistake, the governor said, Speaker Vos and Republicans' short-sighted move to gut our UW system by tens of millions of dollars is about one thing: Republicans' decade-long war on higher education institutions in our state. It's clear, Evers says, that Republicans have no real or meaningful solutions to address our state's long-standing workforce challenges, and that includes making the necessary investments to education and retain talented students across our state. And what he's making reference to is how not that long ago, Republicans also voted to reject a proposal to expand the University of Wisconsin Madison campus College of Engineering, which would have widened the jobs pipeline into the state. And even as they want to cut tens of millions of dollars from the University of Wisconsin, they agreed with Evers on a deal that would put a record amount of money into each public school voucher, something we're going to talk about at the bottom of the hour. Now, Assembly Speaker Vos was also asked by Scott Bauer at a Wisconsin Health News event if the speaker has hedged at all on allowing for Medicaid expansion, something that Republicans have refused to do for over a decade. Wisconsin is one of only 10 states now losing out on multiple billions of dollars and cheating Wisconsin residents, working families at lower income levels out of affordable, accessible, secure health care. Vos responded, "As long as I am Speaker of the Assembly, Medicaid expansion will never happen." So I guess the war on the UW and the wars on the poors will continue from the GOP as long as gerrymandered maps allow them to continue to control the Wisconsin legislature. And in what shouldn't be much of a surprise, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin held its convention over the weekend and did formally endorse President Joe Biden and Senator Tammy Baldwin for re-election in 2024. Yeah, it sounds pro forma, but why are we mentioning it? Because there have been times in the past where there wasn't that kind of party unanimity behind an incumbent. It's much like the Republicans right now are certainly not unanimous behind the man who was their nominee the last couple of times around, Donald Trump. The Democratic Party's 63-member administrative committee wanted to send a clear and resounding message of party unity heading into 2024. Party Chair Ben Wickler said, "Everything that President Biden and Vice President Harris have achieved over the last 3 years is on the line, from a historic economic recovery and some of the lowest unemployment rates in a half century to game-changing investments in our infrastructure and defending the country against MAGA extremist attacks on our freedoms and the freedom to make decisions about our own bodies and the freedom of democracy itself." We'll take a break. Sports, weather, and more coming up next. You're Up North.
I keep forgetting to go in and edit together a slightly cleaner version of that intro, but now I did.
Okay.
I guess that doesn't actually tell you what I edited. Never mind.
That's okay. All right, temperatures around the state right now include 56 degrees in Amory, 55 in Waukesha, Green Bay coming in at 59, Wisconsin Rapids 56 degrees. We'll get a full forecast from Weatherology here from Jennifer Wachitsky coming up next as we look at what appear to be hazier conditions around Wisconsin from those northern wildfires. But let's get the full details now as Jen joins us. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, well, like you said, there are some areas of widespread haze due to the Canadian wildfires. So definitely something to keep in mind, especially for those who have respiratory issues. And it looks like 80-degree weather expected for most today, so above average, a little cooler around Oshkosh down to Waukesha and to the lakefront. Slight chance for rain in the afternoon hours for parts of Wisconsin today, too. Wausau to Wisconsin Rapids down to Waukesha and Milwaukee. Otherwise, sunny skies, Madison up to Richland Center and over to Amory and Baldwin. However, in that west central and even northern parts of Wisconsin today, those are the areas of looking at widespread haze due to those wildfires. The wildfire haze will continue there into Thursday and start to spread into central and southern or southwestern Wisconsin tomorrow as well. Otherwise, relatively clear and sunny in southern Wisconsin tomorrow. Dry for Thursday and temperatures relatively similar today in southern Wisconsin, then slightly cooler from Oshkosh to Wausau and over towards Amory as a slight cold front begins to come in, which is why we'll expect to see that wildfire haze coming in for parts of the state here more so for tomorrow. Friday, sunny across the board in the 70s for most, but getting back into the 80s from Richland Center over to Baldwin, and then sunny skies to start off the weekend for most on Saturday. However, a slight chance for rain and storms coming in to western Wisconsin by Saturday afternoon. Highs in the 80s for most, and then a chance for some rain across the board for everyone on Sunday, with highs mainly in the 80s, in the 70s closer to Lake Michigan.
It sounds like people ought to keep their radios close at hand to their favorite civic media station and get the latest weatherology forecast. Jennifer, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
There's Jennifer Wachitsky from Weatherology giving us our update for today. The Brewers were up 5-3 on the Twins heading into the bottom of the ninth at Target Field. It didn't last. The Twins had a 4-run inning in the bottom of the ninth, walked it off with a Carlos Correa home run into the left field seats, and the Twins beat the Brewers last night 7-5. The Brewers have now lost 5 in a row. They're in second place, one game behind Pittsburgh. And not so coincidentally, Pittsburgh is coming to town next. The Brewers and Twins will play one more game at Target Field this afternoon, off Thursday. And then the Pirates come to town for 3 games. You can hear those games in Richland Center on 107.7 FM News from the Center, as well as 1450 AM, or in the Fox Valley on Oshkosh Air Support, 98.3 FM and 1100 AM throughout the area. Aaron, I have not talked about lately my borderline addiction to the Instapot. But it appears that the maker of the Instapot, who is also the maker of Pyrex glassware, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy as the company sees Americans pulling back on their spending. This seems to me like, again, another one of those natural followings from the pandemic receding. The pandemic had everybody at home. Everybody was trying to learn how to make sourdough bread, or they were using an Instapot for the first time. I love my Instapot, but apparently everybody who wanted the newest gadgets got the newest gadgets, and folks just aren't buying them like they used to.
It also, this is one of the cases where I think Pyrex manufactured their own bankruptcy because they make good stuff. So you buy it, and you're like, okay, I have my Pyrex dishes now.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're not growing your base, and if you're not doing the, what I call the planned obsolescence, like software, like, oh, you have to update it every 2 years. We built the software that way, or whatever. If you build a good product, you've got to keep growing that base if it lasts a long time. But that's like any other durable good.
And the issue is, if you design planned obsolescence into your glass cookware, like after you've put this in the fridge so many times and oscillate the temperature, it's just going to shatter. People aren't going to buy it.
No, they're not. And so I'm sure that the company will emerge from this, because people aren't going to stop buying these things. They're just not buying them at the level that they used to when the pandemic was first coming on board. News reports say that up in Lac du Flambeau, the town has agreed to pay the tribe $22,000 to keep roads on the reservation open to the public for another month. The town of Lac du Flambeau's easements on 1.25 miles of land in the Lac du Flambeau band of Lake Superior Chippewa Reservation, those easements expired about a decade ago, and negotiations had gone nowhere. The tribe finally barricaded the roads in January to prevent non-tribal property owners from accessing or leaving their homes except to buy food or other essential items like prescription drugs. The property owners sued the tribe in federal court in February. That case is pending in front of a U.S. district judge, and then the U.S. Justice Department filed its own lawsuit in support of the tribe, arguing that the town has been trespassing on the reservation since the easements expired. Now, Wisconsin Public Radio is reporting that the tribe agreed in March to open the roads for 90 days in exchange for $60,000 from the town. That deal expired Monday. So apparently the town is now going to pay $22,000 for road access through July 12th. The tribal council passed a resolution last month calling for payments to increase by $2,000 every month going forward, meaning the town's bill for road access from July 12th to August 12th would go up to $24,000 a year. And so again, hopefully now that the lawsuits have been filed and the lawyers are involved, with any luck, people can start to take the negotiations seriously at this point and get this resolved, because again, it's long past time for cooler heads to prevail and for these easements to be renewed, not to be taken for granted and negotiated fairly and properly. I mentioned in the last hour that Republicans in Congress have been so fixated on making up things against Hillary Clinton or Hunter Biden, doing anything to try to divert from the very serious federal criminal charges against Donald Trump, that they're neglecting the basic work that they should be doing, like passing a new federal budget, especially on the heels of the recent negotiations that prevented a government default. We are past that showdown over the debt ceiling. Now we can get back to the regular business of crafting a budget. But again, current events are getting in the way, to the point where we even mentioned last hour, Republican Derek Van Orden apparently had sharp words for his own caucus and wanted things to kind of get the train back on track, as it were. And as we're learning more about what Van Orden and perhaps other Republicans may be supporting for a new federal budget, it simply overturns any talking points they may have had last month about being serious about the deficit. This is coming from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget that says that one of the new Republican proposals, as written, would cost $80 billion over a decade with interest, including $320 billion through the end of fiscal year 2025. Why does it cost so much more in the first couple of years and then less later on? Mainly because tax cuts in the bill are set to expire at the end of 2025. But if these temporary tax cuts were to become permanent, and Republicans do this all the time, they pass something they say is a temporary tax cut, and then they try to make it permanent. If that were to happen, this new plan being considered by Republicans in Congress would cost $1.1 trillion. It is very tough to take seriously a party that has always talked a good game about fiscal conservatism, but then can't actually put it into practice. They can threaten to and occasionally put in some punishing individual cuts here and there, but in terms of actually having a plan that doesn't drive up the deficit, as we saw in 2017 with the Trump tax cut bill that Ron Johnson ushered through, the deficit just continues to grow as these things come up. It's just not credible, as one insider wrote, for a party to spend 6 months making moral and economic arguments about runaway deficits during the debt limit debate, and then just a week later unveil hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts. Something just ain't right there. And again, this is way overdue, and yet we're forcing a shutdown, Congress is, with the Biden administration, and making claims about Biden and his record when the numbers are readily apparent. Inflation went down again this week. It's down to 4%. Unemployment is below 4%. It's at a 50-year low. Gas prices are back below $3.50 in most places. Border encounters are down 70%. Heck, the Biden administration, even when they sold off oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, they made taxpayers a profit. They sold 3 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at $95 a barrel. And then they bought them back at $73 a barrel, netting a profit for taxpayers of $66 million. There's so much that's going right here, but it doesn't get talked about much because of the drama in Congress and the drama in courtrooms, first in New York, now in Miami, as a lifelong white-collar criminal is finally being rung up on federal charges and will go to trial. Though I will say, in the light of yesterday's arraignment in Miami, much like the one in New York over hush money, that was essentially that first really early loud clap of thunder before a thunderstorm, but then there's kind of a lull before the storm actually gets there. And that's basically what this was. The trials themselves will not happen until 2024 during a presidential campaign. And that's what's put the Republican Party into a box of what do? They can defend Trump all they want right now. And if the case were happening, if the trial were happening right away, much like, say, Trump's first impeachment and second impeachment, they could get those behind them. They could hope for a not guilty plea, carry on with a presidential campaign. But it's not going to work that way. There's going to be filings. There's going to be motions. There's going to be discovery of evidence. Kind of like the whole Dominion lawsuit against Fox News. There was kind of this slow drip of evidence that came up in discovery in preparation for the trial. And then on the eve of the trial itself, on the very opening day of the trial, Fox News said, "We give up, we want to settle." Is that what the Republican Party wants to have happen with Donald Trump? Are we going to have this drip from now until late winter, early spring for the hush money trial, and perhaps sometime shortly after that, in the middle of 2024, just as Trump's about to go on trial? How much longer does he get to drag out this presidential campaign before other Republicans say, It's just too hot to handle. When we come back, Chris Hambuck-Boyle joins us along with Christian Phelps, and we will talk about the bargain that was struck between Governor Evers and legislative Republicans, one that does a lot of good things, but also does some things that public education advocates really don't like to see. We'll get into it in more detail right after this break. You're Up North.
Just crossed my mind.
Hello there, Chris.
Hello. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm good.
All right.
Hope you are the same.
I am very much so. Let's see here.
Also, we are still live on Facebook and Twitter.
Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube now. Yes. Let's see. Wisconsin Public Education Network, right, Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we were there yesterday at the Capitol, so that was interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't stay because they went in really late, and then I guess didn't wrap up their business.
They didn't. See, I stayed on till about 11,
Mm-hmm.
a little after 11, and then I was up by 4:30. I thought to get to Madison, so I went to bed.
Sure. Well, no, makes perfect sense. Hey, Christian, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thank you. We were
It's
just
so hard
talking
to
about
understand.
the long day and night you guys had yesterday.
Yes.
It's nice to have coffee with you.
I would suggest that rushing through a bunch of stuff that all happens on the same day that starts very early and ends very late isn't a terribly democratic way of doing business. But
You could argue that, and you'd be 100% right.
Yeah.
I don't think the leopard's going to change its spots, unfortunately. But
yes.
oh well.
It's so
Oh yes.
it's disheartening to just have that grind be the thing over and over and over again.
Oh yeah. Yep. So we'll just kind of go through the process of the day yesterday. Talk about some of the details in there. Get your reaction to them. What you would like to see happening instead. We'll also make note that it's not entirely a done deal. It may very well be, but sometimes when these things get to the full assembly or the full Senate, individual members could decide that, something else needs to be added or subtracted. So people can still contact their legislator if they want to have some input on it.
Right.
There were a lot of people, though. There were a lot of people who testified and a lot of people who stepped up to say how they felt about things on both
Good.
sides. But that part was good.
There we go. Okay. And Christian, just in case you missed it at the top of the break, we are in a radio commercial break for 1 more minute, though we are still live on social media. All right, we'll get going in 30 seconds here.
Follow Up North News with our daily newsletter. Go to our website, upnorthnewswi.com, and click newsletter on the top banner. Once again, here's Pat Kreitlow.
Over at our website, UpNorthNewsWI.com, you can see everything that our team has been working on, including my newest editorial. The new bipartisan deal on education funding has something for everyone to like and hate. And we're going to get into the details of that here with our guests, Chris Hambuck-Boyle and Christian Phelps, who join us from the Wisconsin Public Education Network. They were in Madison yesterday trying to follow what was happening through the Joint Finance Committee and through other lawmakers throughout the building. Started early, went late. We appreciate you guys getting up early with us this morning. Chris, good morning. Christian, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to have you both here. It was a long day yesterday, Chris. Just take us through the day, what all you had to do to try to follow what was happening with this school funding deal.
Well, we got up very early, and Christian and I headed to Madison, at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we wanted to bear witness and testify at the piece about public education and the budget that is about to be, looked at by everybody. And the room was packed, and the testimonies by people in what they needed or wanted within that bill or added to it or changed, was stark. Basically, there wasn't a lot of compromise in the sense of how we were listened to or the questions asked. Although I think, it was different for me. I'm used to testifying at the joint finance hearings. This was a little different because they asked questions and we had a little bit more time at the mic. So I felt that was a little bit more friendly for me, but I'd never done that before. I don't know, Christian, what do you think?
Yeah, I had similar feelings. It was really unfortunate and disappointing to see the way that this deal ended up being structured, in addition to the content of it that included so many things that just don't come close to what students actually need from this budget process. The way it was structured sort of fractured pieces of the deal into separate bills, would pair things together that really didn't have anything to do with each other in ways that felt like a trap. And where people would have to either oppose something great and something harmful, not either or. And then the pace of it. I mean, the bill that Chris and I were talking about yesterday morning was one that would tie a huge increase in the use of public dollars on private education to an increase in districts with low revenue limits ability to spend more on their students. So neither could pass without the other on that bill. It was introduced towards the tail end of last week, and they already had their hearings in committee on Monday and Tuesday of this week to be included in the larger education budget that ended up being passed out of the Joint Finance Committee last night. So the process has just been nearly impossible to keep up with, in addition to sort of reacting to the content of all this.
It's a lot like other pieces of legislation where it seems to take forever to come together. And then when it does, it goes through such a breakneck pace that outsiders, in other words, their constituents, can't really keep up with this. So when we talk about this compromise, and let me back up a step. We knew there was going to have to be some kind of a compromise when Governor Evers won. Republicans had put all of their eggs in the Tim Michels basket. They were hoping that he'd be governor. They could do so much more to build up voucher schools and tear down public schools. But when Governor Evers won, but the legislature was still controlled by Republicans, it was pretty clear there was going to have to be some kind of compromise. And I was one of the first to say, I think the one big thing that's going to end up happening is that Democrats are going to have to swallow hard, as will public education advocates, and say that there's going to be more money because of this record budget surplus for public schools, but probably a lot more money into the voucher schools as well. And Chris, to me, that means that while there may be something that, people on both sides of the aisle like, the strengthening of the individual vouchers, how much money goes into each one, does make this an unbalanced compromise, in that we will still have a voucher school program that is an existential threat to public education.
I agree. And I think the other parts, per pupil revenue limits, I mean, they heard over and over and over again at the joint finance hearings from their majority. It was the majority piece talked about at the joint finance hearings about that 1510 per pupil. We got about half that. And there's over 120 some districts right now that haven't made up the inflation since 93 when the revenue caps were put in. So, I mean, and then to say this is this huge amount of money, and you're correct, Pat, for schools, most of it is going to the largest increase in money going to private schools in our state's history. So it's very disappointing, especially since we educate 84% of the kids in the state of Wisconsin. And
You have the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee, Republican Representative Mark Bourne of Beaver Dam, talking about how this is a lot of money being invested in the future of Wisconsin. He described the deal as a grand bargain with Evers in this story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel by Molly Beck, but also quotes Democratic Senator Kelda Roys saying to Republicans, "You're still $1 billion short. Even with this, you've dug a huge hole." Christian, can you explain that a bit more? Chris mentioned it as well, that the, over a decade of austerity, it continues to hamstring public schools, even with this arrangement.
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question in that way, because I hope that listeners and viewers are able to notice when people frame a school funding deal in a raw dollar amount without context. Yes, it costs money to educate every young person in an entire state. I hope that is a logical fact to follow. But hearing a large dollar amount without the context of inflation, without the context of student need, and the fact that for 30, 40 years, most districts have been to some level underfunded, and certainly for the past decade, they have significantly lagged inflation. And oh, by the way, inflation for the last 2 years, since the last time we had a budget process, has skyrocketed and is, as everybody knows, very high lately. The amount invested into public schools should be put into that context in order to actually understand what's being done. And if we're not putting money that at least keeps up with inflation, or better yet, catches up to the lags in inflation that have been caused by past frozen budgets, it's not adequate. It's just widening the gaps that we already have and setting people further behind than they already are right now.
And speaking of gaps and inadequate funding, Chris, let's talk about a couple of things that the governor was seeking and had to accept half a loaf, essentially, but we can debate, whether it was a half or not. One of them is special education funding, and the other is one that I'll come back to. But let's start first with the special education funding. What is the reimbursement level right now for public schools? The governor, I know, wanted some kind of an increase. What did he end up getting?
Well, I think he went into the budget at 60%. I personally feel that we should be the same as what is the funding for private schools for special education vouchers at 90 plus, which they even upped it in this budget. But we are hovering right now a little bit below 30%. In this omnibus bill, we're 33.3%. Evan Goike on the floor was passionate for not voting for this because of the special ed piece. And there's so many nuances with special education, Pat, that, when you look at services provided between our two, I'm going to say school systems, because, that got brought up yesterday too. Our state can't fund both, but we're getting the raw end of the stick on this. And so that was very disappointing.
And we've emphasized it before. I'm going to emphasize it again and again for folks that public school districts are at best going to be getting 33% state reimbursement for what they do for special education programs, while voucher schools get 90%.
Well, this bill is 100. What was it? I wrote it down. It's over 100% funded now for private schools in this bill.
that don't
I-
necessarily have to take everybody who applies, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. That's very true. I mean, I don't want to disparage the fact that some do, but a lot don't. And they also, if it becomes hard for them to provide for a child with special needs, they send them back to the public schools.
Right.
So,
It just goes to go ahead, Christian, about the inequities of special education. Then we're going to get into mental health funding.
Yeah, I mean, special education funding was I would say it was the number one most common priority that I heard in public testimony before the Joint Finance Committee on the budget, because everybody that touches the school system in any way and learns about how it works is appalled at the insulting rate at which the state funds special education costs. Public schools have a constitutional responsibility to welcome every single student and to educate them and to provide all the resources that they need. It isn't just a constitutional responsibility, it's a moral obligation, and one that educators across the state take on happily because they believe, as we do, that every student deserves a great education. But the state isn't funding that. So what ends up happening is that districts are pulling money from their general fund to provide those services. And so increasing the special ed reimbursement rate would not only get closer to parity with private schools that, as Chris has already mentioned, do have access to a separate set of rules, but also it would lift all boats because districts would have their budgets freed up to empower their educators to do what they do best instead of having to scramble.
And Governor Evers did propose much more funding for schools to provide mental health services. He did get an increase, but again, Christian, I think it was far short of what the governor was looking for, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. And I mean, just to be clear, I mean, it isn't just what the governor was looking for. We tracked public testimony very meticulously this spring, and urban, suburban, rural people, parents, educators, administrators, and students were asking for the same things because people live in the world. They can see that mental health is a problem right now. We're coming out of a pandemic. We're going through inflation. We're coming out of decades of austerity in public schools. Mental health, special education, districts' ability to actually free up their budgets. These were priorities for everybody. And so falling short of that is really, really disheartening to see because, oh, by the way, we do still have a $7 billion surplus in our state budget. We could afford to do every single one of those things and more.
That was just where I was going to start to wrap things up. Chris, there is this record-sized budget surplus that could be applied. This is not a done deal, though one could say it is so complex, as you've outlined, with bills essentially being tied together. It would be tough, but again, anything can happen once these things get to the floor of the Assembly or Senate. Do you think it's a good idea for people to still be in touch with their state legislator and look for a change?
I do. I've done it. I was on the phone already last week, and I think it is the advocacy piece that people need to do now. I want to reemphasize the fact that when you do make that phone call, to really display your advocacy and passion for what public schools do for our state, for our country, but also reiterate what Christian said in the sense that it isn't the amount of money. I've heard over and over and over again when I called, it's $1 billion. That's a lot of money. But I say it's the specifics on how that money is spent and where it goes. And also the fact of the history of the funding within the schools. You have to keep that in mind and remind them. A lot of the staffers you talk to don't have that history nor that knowledge. So I think it's important to really hammer that home.
And the Wisconsin Legislative Hotline is 800-362-9472. You can reach your legislator wherever you are in the state at that number, 800-362-9472. Chris Hambuck-Boyle, Christian Phelps of the Wisconsin Public Education Network. Thank you very much for your expertise and for giving us a little of your time after a very busy day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, we will wrap things up here on a Wednesday morning, talking to Todd Alba of the conveniently named Todd Alba Show. Next, you're up north. All righty, there we go. All right, you guys, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
letting me crash your party.
All right, yeah. Hey, keep in touch with any updates or anything you want to go over. You know where to find me.
Yes, likewise.
Sounds good.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you. Yep,
Bye-bye.
you bet. Mr. Alba.
Well, Mr. Kreitlow, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. We got to get you a microphone for that room, buddy.
Oh, I have. It's a Shure microphone. It must be. I don't know what the
It
hell
sounds
is
like
about
it's
it.
not using it though. It might be using your computer's mic.
Yeah, you
is that-
definitely sound like
how
your
do I-
computer microphone.
hang on.
There
Go to
is a settings.
Yeah,
Yep.
all right,
And
all
then
right, all right,
an
all right.
audio.
All right. Hang on.
Hey, wait a minute.
Is that better?
That is
now you
so
just
much
got
better. Oh my goodness.
See, I set all this. I set it all for Zoom, and then the StreamYard. It's like, oh, I got to go back and do settings. I guess.
Oh,
Sorry.
sure.
Can you
That's
get a
okay.
little bit closer to it though?
What?
Can you get a little bit closer to it or turn it up
Oh,
or something?
Yep. Is that better?
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
All right.
It's always nice not to be doing the show from the can is what.
Oh, absolutely.
Although if you've got a copy of Horde's Dairyman there, you can always catch up on the markets and things.
Well, I could try. I have the Farmer's Almanac somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Is it sunny up north today?
Yeah, but hazy. It's going to be a smoky one.
Yeah, it is going to be smoky. Well, Pat Robertson's body is still burning in hell. So,
Wow! Did not see that one coming. All right. 10 seconds, kids. Wow.
Do you ever feel like a plastic bag drifting through the wind, wanting to start again? Do you ever feel so paper thin? Like
Again, I let Aaron Zommers pick up the walk-up music to Todd Alba. So,
all right.
Aaron?
It just felt like the vibe for today.
Oh,
Felt like
okay.
the vibe for today.
So Todd is our firework.
Well, it is. You know what? Happy Flag Day, Pat.
There you
and
go.
Aaron. I've got my
There we
flags
go. I'll
out.
pretend that's what I did.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's it.
it is. And it's Happy Flag Day.
You're our firework. I heard the music first and I thought, oh my God, did Aaron cue it up too? Did you ever feel like you're a waste of space? And you're just like, what are you trying to?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yes, the answer is yes.
The Todd Alba Show has moved to weekday afternoons 1 to 3 all across the Civic Media Radio Network. So far, so good over there, buddy?
Yeah, so far so good. It's going well. We're enjoying it, and Mr. Zommers is doing a great job. He's working these yeoman shifts, so it's fantastic.
Okay. Aaron looked like he had an opposing opinion on that.
Oh no, I think it's going great. I'm enjoying it. The show is a lot snappier in the afternoon. So if you were a morning listener, you can relax, get your drive into work, and wake up. But in the afternoon, you're already awake.
He's just right there. Got to keep going.
Yep.
All right. Todd, I was on your show last week as the arraignment was being, or the indictment rather, was being announced to former President Trump. Yesterday was the arrest and arraignment. I'm sure that will be a topic of your show today. As you were watching it, do you get the sense that this is, just a part of the judicial process that will best serve America? Or did you get a feeling that like the O.J. Simpson trial, we're just creating the next media circus? Are you with us, Todd? Am I the one who's missing?
No, it seems we have encountered some technical difficulties.
Oh no. Wait a minute.
No,
I
I'm
think
back.
see him again.
I'm sorry. It's the darn the internet's flipped to like the public internet at the store next door. So that's what happened. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
well, that's not good. Although, look, I'll get back to the question in a second here, but we had an all radio host thing last evening at 5:00. And I know a lot of people can relate to this. You open up Zoom and the first thing it does every so often is Zoom needs to install an update. And of course, then my laptop didn't want to restart Zoom, so I didn't join that thing for like the first 10 minutes, and amazingly didn't throw the laptop out the window. But getting back to my original question to Todd,
I heard it,
was whether the arraignment is going to flow naturally, or if have we created just the latest media circus and we will get nothing productive out of this in the end.
No, I mean the system is created to offer everyone a fair and equal trial, right? I mean, there is to be fair, we have to say there's a presumption of innocence, right, for the trial to move forward. But when you look at the overwhelming amount of evidence that the Department of Justice, the special prosecutor Smith have put forward, it's pretty hard to imagine uh, that you could have a defense that would overcome all that evidence. And when you listen to the rhetoric of the former president last night, I did not watch the whole thing at Bedminster. I did see snippets on CNN. By the way, CNN is looking a lot more like CNN since Chris Licht left, and Jake Tapper is basically being the director. He just told the director on the air, he's like, "Get rid of that stuff in the cafe with Trump. We've seen it before." I mean, he's directing his own show, which I love.
Wait, you mean journalists
Um,
are taking care of the calling the shots? God,
I know, really,
that's a nice change. Let's see if that'll last.
right?
But Trump
But
Trump basically continues to confess to the crimes, and says, well, the law says I can do this when the law most certainly does not. And to hear so many sycophants also parrot this line that what Trump did is not illegal when you look at the letter of the law, and not make the false comparisons to other cases. I did ask earlier in the day, since these trials are going to happen in 2024 in the throes of a presidential campaign, how much longer will the other Republican candidates, how much longer will the party stick with this before, much like the Fox News trial with Dominion, it gets closer to trial, you discover more evidence, the heat gets hotter, the pressure becomes more intense. Can this really be sustained, and Trump be a viable candidate as he's on trial?
Unfortunately, I think the answer is yes. I mean, I don't see any evidence of the Republican Party abandoning him. And in fact, with his base, with that 35% base, it only strengthens them. His numbers continue to go up. He's raising like $2 million a day off of his fundraising off of this. And other than Chris Christie and Asia Hutchinson, no major Republican has stepped forward. Other than, by the way, we talked about this yesterday on our show. Paul Ryan was on CBS Mornings yesterday, former congressman from Wisconsin, Speaker of the House. He's certainly a never again Trumper, but not many other people in the Republican Party are following that. And that's what's going to be interesting, Pat, on Friday at the state Republican convention in La Crosse, is how many state Republicans are going to disavow this with Trump, or are they going down the, like Scott Fitzgerald, are they still on the Trump train?
Well, here's the thing. It's going to be tougher for us to find out because, and we've not discussed this on this program, but you have, and Kristen Bry on your programs, that the Republican Party of Wisconsin is trying to fundraise basically off the creation and existence of civic media radio stations, extended an invitation, and then revoked the invitation for civic media to be at the state Republican convention, because apparently civic debate, rather than right-wing radio, is apparently too frightening. There's a snowflake reference in there someplace, I guess.
I mean, just the irony of it, Pat. I mean, you were a state legislator, state senator at the Capitol, and you know that guys like Tommy Thompson and others. I mean, any mic in the room, they were on it. Any camera, they wanted to see it. And now you have a Republican Party that wants to hide behind closed doors and not allow public access, public discourse. They don't want to come on our shows, at least sitting Republicans. We haven't found many yet that want to do that. And it's just a sad day for Wisconsinites, because the Republican Party is clearly afraid of their platform. They know that their platform is not a 50% plus one vote getter. Look what happened to their essentially their nominee for Supreme Court, got beat by Judge Janet Protasevich by 10, 11 points. That wasn't the best case because Kelly was a terrible candidate. But I mean, their ideas are not connecting, and they don't want the light of day shed on that. They want to control the narrative, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, it is because these are folks, you being a former staffer to a Republican state senator, understand the value of discussions with people, even when you don't necessarily agree, but you can still have that civil conversation. And for the Republican Party of Wisconsin to be so afraid of that as to say that civic media can't be at the Republican convention, and then to fundraise off of it as well with things that were frankly, erroneous at best, distorted or downright lies, is, like you said, it's a shame, but somehow we'll manage to convey what they're talking about at the convention anyway. Todd Alba will do that on his fine radio show weekdays from 1 to 3. I might even show up there today if you don't mind.
We would love to have you, Pat. 1 o'clock. We'll start off with Pat Kreitlow, a little Up North news.
Works for me. All right, Todd. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you for being with us as well. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will pick this up again, hometown health and more, on Thursday here on Up North News Radio. Have a great day.